speakers with an hour. In this case, we had 2 with an hour and a half. So we kindly invited Darco Jansen to meet us, as he's been covering the European MOOC territory for quite a long time. So this is going to give us a little bit more, I would say, things to discuss. And I'm very happy to be able to chair this session because this actually was supposed to be one of the key, as you would say, items on the MOOC agenda, at least 3 years ago. You know, whenever the MOOC hype began and anyone started talking about disrupting universities and university education, of course there was a little detail which was implied, and it was that you would also be able to issue certificates for which universities in fact are alive. I mean, alive in the sense that they do transmit content, you know, top quality content. But if you can imagine, if at the end of this attending courses in a university you wouldn't get a degree, what would be your guess about the rate of attendance and enrollment in the university? I would say pretty low. Would you agree? Yes. So what we have learned today and also yesterday is that there has been a major shift in the, let's say, vision of major MOOC providers across the world. I must say this was a unifying factors in all the presentation that we listened, and it's been very clearly put up this morning. And it's that rather than disrupting the universities, they've been finding ways to cooperate with the universities, which after all is not a bad idea. Item 1 in this cooperation effort is not to put too much emphasis on online degrees. I'm using a rather euphemistical way. But of course, you know, I had a question I would have liked to do, to raise this morning, then there was very little time, because as a social scientist, I was kind of struck by the figures that, you know, were presented, like 40 million of expected new degrees in the United States alone. And with such a power machine like Coursera, not a single degree being offered now, that is in a way pretty stunning in a way, but it is part of the, you know, evolving strategy. And I understand it because the strategy is being so successful in addressing the lifelong learning new, somewhat, or at least very large audience. This has not been anymore a priority, but still the problem is there. And what, of course, it is very interesting. We saw some of that coming up in the introduction about future learn, but very little. You know, I remember that the speaker said he was very excited by the fact that they were starting offering 5 degrees, you know, this year, and but still it's only very little. And what we see in terms of degrees is basically in the so-called micro-credential, which is of course very important, very interesting. It's a growing market, so it is nothing not to speak about. But I hope in a way that we'll be also able to understand whether is there like a shift about short-term, middle-term, long-term. I mean, is there, and this would be one of the questions that at some point I would like to raise, but I leave the floor to the speaker for their introduction, whether there is going to be in the future any strategy where it will come a time where all this massive, incredible, extraordinary potential of courses which are now available on the major American platform could find its way towards full-fledged university degrees. Because clearly there is a strong demand there, again, demand ranging in the numbers of tens of millions, and this still remains a question. And I understand it's a rather critical question. It's got strategic implications, business models, but still, in terms of the originary mission and vision of the MOOCs, to me it remains an important question. I will, at this point, however, you know, give the floor to Annechien Helsdingen, from the University of Lausanne, and she has been doing quite a bit of a program, as I understand, in the direction of trying to pull some of the wires of the European certification processes together. So we'll be very anxious to hear from her what's happening. Thank you. Are we moving on do we agree on something like what, a 10, 12 minutes presentation so that we can then have a more like a discussion? Is that all right with you?
Yes, that's perfect.
Fine. Great, thank you.
That's perfect, and I'll try to keep it short. I'm from École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, not University of Lausanne, but slightly different institution, but very close together. Anyways, very happy to be here today. At the École Polytechnique, we've created lots of MOOCs so far. Some of them are being used in our classes. Some of them are developed to educate the world. Some of them are for specific niche markets. So we have a diversity of MOOCs. It's been a bottom-up process, I think. And a couple of years ago, Pierre and some other people that are in the room here came up with the idea to start collaborating on sharing MOOCs for credits. Now, if you want to, and I want to talk to you today about that project, I want to introduce that project and some of the challenges that we still have in relation to credits for MOOCs and the quality of the MOOCs. If you want to incorporate MOOCs into your formal education and you want to allocate, well, you can set up the presentation. It makes it more, but I cannot manipulate it myself. Oh, can I? Oh, that would be good, because I only want to show a few slides. If you want to incorporate MOOCs into your formal education, of course you can do that as a university. You can do that. You just need to go and select the MOOCs that are relevant for your programs. So you need some sort of selection criteria. You need to be able to assess the MOOCs in terms of quality, and then you need some sort of assessment that is reliable and valid for your students. And very often you cannot rely on the assessment or the exams that are already in edX, because that content might already be shared among lots of learners. So what we decided was, if we want to incorporate these MOOCs, we need to work with some universities that we trust. And we set up a system so that not all of us individually need to go out and search for MOOCs that are relevant for our formal programs, but we can learn as a group together and offer and select MOOCs for that. If I know how to manipulate this, I can show you the partners that we have. Yes, here are the partners. There's two groups that are that we are involved in that are looking at MOOCs for credits. The idea is that this group of universities all have MOOCs. They're of high quality. Some of them are already offered in their own universities for credits. Some of them not yet, but they're going to do that. And we have a European Virtual Exchange Group, EVE, and we have a Global Alliance. But for the student, the experience should be similar. So whether the MOOC is coming from the one alliance or the other, that doesn't matter. The student gets a broader set of courses for them, and they can select from a set of MOOCs from any of these universities. There's 4 guiding principles. Mutual trust between the universities offering these MOOCs for credits. So if you offer a MOOC to your own students, then apparently it's good enough quality for your university. So me coming from my university, I trust that, and I can accept that MOOC. A modest effort. The nice thing about MOOCs is that they're scalable, that lots of things are going automatically. So It shouldn't be that we now ask our professors to do a lot more to provide this MOOCs to other universities. Different timing. We have synchronous and asynchronous MOOCs and sessions and exams, but the exams should be at the same time in all the universities. The responsibilities for the host university offering the MOOC is that they have to offer the MOOC to their own students and to the students from other universities. They will develop the assessment and grade the assessment and transfer then the results to the home university of the student. The exams are taking place at each institution that is part of this alliance at the same time. So you don't have to travel, you follow the MOOC as a student, and you do an on-site exam. No, that's not where I wanted to go. The home university, so the university where the student is coming from, does not have to accept all the MOOCs that are being offered by other universities. They can make their own selection, depending on the programs that they have running. They have to proctor the exams on site. So if you offer, as a home university, if you offer a MOOC, for example, an EPFL MOOC, you have to guarantee that you will be able to proctor the exam on site and under the same rules and guidelines that EPFL has for its own students. So just to give you an example, if at EPFL during an exam you cannot go to the bathroom, then if a TU Delft student is taking that exam, he cannot go to the bathroom. That sort of rules. Some of them are trivial, some of them are more important. We have only one session for an exam. Many universities offer 2 sessions per semester. So they offer a reseat. We don't offer that. If you want to include our MOOC into your program and you want us to assess the exams that you take, then there's only 1 session per semester. There's a few challenges, a few target outcomes. We're looking at an exchange, a balanced exchange between universities. But most importantly, we have a lot of challenges when we're offering this. I think trust is very important between the partners. We trust each other's quality, but when it comes to online exams, when it comes to the students being able to choose correctly, EPFL only in many programs only offers 6 free credits, so there's not much for a student to maneuver, so to say, to take other courses. Many universities have regulations that prevent students from just freely selecting courses that they would like. So when it comes to bundling and unbundling the course offerings, the programs, as we were talking about in other discussions, I'm not so sure. We're not really student-centered yet. And we determine what a master in economics is. As a university, we determine what the program for a master in engineering is, not the student, him or herself. And I think for truly unbundling, you might want to make it more student-centered. That's one of the discussion points I want to put up here. So that's the introduction of the credits, MOOCs for Credits program. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, this was so sharp, clear, and even short, which is fantastic. So now it's Johannes Heinlein, who is Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at EDX, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. I do want to make a comment before I start, just because, Mauro, you mentioned US platforms. certainly from our perspective, edX, we see ourselves, as I'm sure other MOOC providers do as well, actually as a global platform. We happen to be based in the US, but truly we're an open source platform. If you look at the adaptation, I can only speak for edX now, we have a national platform in France based on our technology, so that is certainly not a US-based in that extent.
I'm sorry, I was talking as a political scientist and looking at the control, but still, I mean, it's okay.
So I happen to live in the US, but I don't get to vote there. So let's not talk about US politics, because then I have to leave the country. Anyway, as an introductory remark, just wanted to say that what I also wanted to do now is just in a few minutes provide a little bit of context as to where edX came from and how we seek to address both the issues of quality and recognition of MOOC courses. So as a context, I think it might be quite important to go back 5 years when edX was first founded. Right from the beginning, we issued certificates for courses, and those certificates at that point were called honor code. There was no proctoring involved, so it was open to everyone, just like MOOCs are, but everyone who completed the course received a certificate. Now, those certificates didn't have any real academic credentials, but in some instances, people certainly did see value in them. Now, what we did over time and what our goal was right from the outset was really move towards a point where the credentials for MOOCs would be recognized within academic institutions, but also by employers, because ultimately the vast majority of our students, our learners, I don't mean edX students, university students as well, move on to some sort of career. So that was important to us. So we always tried to link quality and recognition to some extent. And what we did is we set up a training program for our partners, and we defined certain parameters. Because I mentioned to the fellow panelists before, I said quality is always a difficult word, because quality and beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What one university might think is high quality, another institution might define as lower quality. So what we defined is a set of parameters. And so we early on published what we call a MOOC development checklist. So we defined minimum criteria that each MOOC needed to fulfill in order to be published, and then hopefully at some point to be recognized for credit. That MOOC development checklist, by the way, is public, so if you Google edX MOOC development checklist, anybody can see it, and it might be a guide for you as you develop online content as well. We're not saying it's the only guideline, but it is one important guideline. So again, our goal was always to support institutions in the development of content that ultimately would lead to some recognition, ideally on campus. And so then the question is, where are we today? And today, and I'm purely speaking from an edX perspective here, while I'm aware that there are other programs, but at edX, if you think about credits, there are really 6 different programs. So it's evolved quite substantially. And in no particular order, the programs are. The first one is that we do have partnerships with certain institutions who offer credit for individual MOOCs. So you can take, not all of the edX MOOCs, but you can take certain edX MOOCs. If you successfully complete the course, there are US institutions, Charter Oak College and others, who offer credit if you complete a MOOC. So that's the first program where we have recognition for actual MOOCs. The second one, as all of the MOOC providers have, and as we certainly have, as we've evolved from individual courses to broader curricula and programs, we've developed credit for MOOC programs. So this is probably for us right now, quite frankly, the most important aspect of what we're doing, or one of the most important aspects, and that's the MicroMaster program, which we launched last year, initially with MIT, and we now have 50 MicroMaster programs from 20 different universities worldwide. And MicroMaster as a program is such that the MOOCs are available for free, but if you seek academic credit for it, you enroll in a proctored pathway. So we've established procedures and mechanisms to have virtual proctoring engaged in the courses, and learners who complete this are eligible for academic credit at the institution that offers the program. And for those who seek to go on to the academic institution, if they're then admitted, let's say at MIT or University of British Columbia or others, they will get that credit, and that way reduce their time on campus, and it's more cost effective. So that's the second large opportunity for recognition on credits. In addition to that, actually, before the MicroMaster, we launched the Global Freshman Academy, which is the full first year of an undergraduate degree. So Arizona State University on edX offers the full first year of the undergraduate degree, of a bachelor degree, and this is actually admission agnostic. So while the MicroMaster, you can complete the program, you get the certificate at the end, but you still have to be admitted to university to get the university credit. The Global Freshman Academy, you complete it, and if you successfully complete it, you can then apply for the credit, you pay for the credit, and that credit is transferable. So you can use it at any institution, certainly in the US, that accepts the credit. Think of it as an ECTS credit. So in Europe, if the university accepts ECTS credits from a particular course, it's very similar to that. So that's the third program, credit undergraduate. And I would imagine that over time, undergraduate credit offerings grow as well. The next one I won't talk a lot about because Annechien just mentioned it, is the credit exchange. So we're really excited that a number of our partners and other institutions have chosen to engage in this credit exchange. Quite frankly, my hope would be that it grows much beyond the current partner group, but it is probably at this point still very much a pilot, but it is ongoing, and I would imagine that in a year or two there are more institutions who engage in this kind of credit exchange. So there are two left, so there were four so far: credit for MOOCs, credit for MicroMasters, credit for undergraduates, credit exchanges. The two last ones that we offer is we have, again, I'll first mention the credit degree. We just launched a full master's degree by Georgia Tech that is taken fully online on edX. The way that degree program is organized is that there's a core curriculum of a MicroMaster that you can take. Then you apply for admissions, and if you are admitted, then you can take the full master's degree on edX from Georgia Tech in data science. Now that degree is also offered on campus, and I know the Europeans are going to roll their eyes now about the cost, because obviously in the US degrees are a little bit more expensive, or a lot. That degree on campus costs over $50,000. If you take it online fully on edX, it's under $10,000. So it's quite a benefit for those learners who seek to engage in that program. And then the last credit program and exchange that we offer is an interesting one that I particularly am excited for. Is we work together with Chiron, which is a German refugee initiative, and Chiron offers to refugees a set of courses that are made up of MOOC courses from edX and other providers. They've established a course curriculum and partner with universities across Europe. And if the refugees successfully complete the set of courses, then they're offered scholarship and admission on campus. And as far as I understand, even now Chiron is about less than 2 years old, but the first couple of students already completed a full set of undergraduate courses and have now been accepted in university. So that's another not generally open credit exchange program, but it's something that I think is really important, particularly in the European context, or in the global context as well. So those are the 6 credit exchanges and recognition programs that edX engages in. So I guess the question then really that people mostly ask, and Mauro, you were talking about the keynotes this morning and the discussions yesterday, what is next? And I'm going to go out on a limb here a little bit and just speak just a bit about what maybe hopes and aspirations are. We're certainly not there yet, but I do believe that MOOC providers and MOOC courses are going to move into this direction. So first of all, in order to have recognition, you must have some degree of assurances that the student really successfully completes a program. So you must have features in a platform that support the recognition of credits. And that you might call quality. That's the quality aspect. For us, it's a recognition of having, for example, virtual proctoring, of enabling cohorts within MOOC courses so that you can segment those students who take the freely available open online course and those who pursue a credit pathway. So what we've done is we've established certain features like cohorts and teams so that those learners who enroll in the credit track are automatically placed in a separate track, and they might have additional features, they might have additional faculty support, and so on. We think that's really critical. It's critical from an academic perspective, and it's critical for the learner as well, so that there's a true value for them. So that's really important, that you have the features and the support mechanisms to ensure academic credibility. Another important aspect, of course, that goes along with it is that you are enabling the faculty member to engage with the learners so that you have credit data banks, as we call them, not credit, question data banks. So what you can do is you can have multiple questions, and for example, often in the MOOC courses, you have multiple choice exam. It's always the same. You were mentioning one of the concerns is, well, once the exam is out there, you know, in the internet, everything gets exchanged, and people forward the question. So what we've enabled is that there's, in some ways, a randomized problem sets. So what the learner takes, I might take an exam, and Mauro might take it next to me, but we might have actually two different sets of problems. So it makes cheating a lot more difficult. And we think that's another important feature and an ability for faculty members to engage with. So once you've established all of these features, and once you've established the protocol for enabling credit recognition, my hope is, quite frankly, that we will move, and this is something that a lot of academic institutions, I think, are still struggling with, towards a much broader curricular pathway, so that we're moving away from this linear progression within an institution, but that the MOOCs and the versatility and the ability of thousands of MOOCs out there from different institutions really enable the learner to come at some point to a more personalized learning pathway that leads to an outcome that really meets their objectives and still satisfies the academic recognition and the importance of academic credentials. So hopefully in 2-3 years, I don't know, we will be at the point where credit exchanges have grown beyond where they are today, and where there truly is an engagement and exchange of credits across institutions. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for such a sharp and also in a way hopeful presentation. And I now leave the floor to Darco Jansen from EADTU. And most of you, I think, are familiar with Darco. It's quite a presence in these Emoocs from the very beginning. So, Darco.
So, both Anne and Johannes already mentioned that MOOCs will be for credit. So 4 years ago, MOOCs were more in a non-formal education part. You could seek a MOOC credit, but not a formal credit or for credit. And the last 2 years, you see more and more by institutions and by the platforms offered the possibility to get a credit, and that credit even to be recognized as part of a bachelor of master degree. So in Europe, we had a lot of discussion with accreditation organizations, because our bachelor master education programs are accredited by mostly national accreditation organizations. And few of them have published a white paper on this. So there's already for 2 years ago a short document from the Dutch-Flemish accreditation organization. There's one in Denmark, a white paper. It's in Danish, so perhaps Google Translate might help on that. And there's a Swedish report in this. So I tried, as a chair of this policy track, to get one of the accreditation organizations here present at this session. Didn't manage, but I refer to that kind of policy frameworks on accreditation organizations. And therefore, I want to focus on my presentation on the quality frameworks. So not directly on the credits and the recognition of those credits in official programs, because the national accreditation organizations do have a lot of questions about the quality frameworks of MOOCs and how institutions are recognizing that and how accreditation organizations are going to review this. So that's one of the issues we need to talk in Europe. My name is Darco Jansen. I'm from the European Association of Distance Teaching Universities. I'm involved in 6 European MOOC initiatives, and in a couple of those initiatives I asked higher education institutions what are the most important support services you want to collaborate on. That can be collaborating with the major MOOC platform providers, or a more regional collaboration or a national collaboration. And next to support in design and development of courses, at the bottom you see that there is a need for a quality assurance framework. So to improve the quality of MOOCs itself. So there's not, there people from higher education institutions seek assistance, help, guidance with other institutions as well. And quality matters. Quality matters not only for the dropout rates, but also the quality of the pedagogical approaches. There was a lot of critics at first on the XMOOCs approach versus the CMOOCs, who has the best pedagogies, and I saw that one of the papers here presented said there is no difference in engagement, etc. But there's issues on quality of the pedagogical approach. There might be some discussion of the education for all. So what is the aim of the MOOCs? Is it improving campus situation? Is it improving access to education? So the Sustainable Development Goals of UNESCO, quality education for all. And indeed, there's a pathway to higher education. It's not the knowledge of higher education that's freely available, but that's the pathway, and therefore quality matters. So you can check the quality, but like Johannes was saying, it's in the eye of the beholder. So what are the criteria? What is the objectives for the learners, the objectives of the institution, the participants itself? And therefore there is a lot of perspectives on MOOC quality. So you can do it from the learner's point of view, you can do it from the pedagogical framework and have a quality analysis on that. You can do it on the input level, what's provided, the instructional design, the content, the quizzes, the activities, the technology. So that's all the input related. Or the output related, the badges, the success rate, the completion, etc. There is output related quality criteria. So if you look at quality assurance, most of the present public available quality assurance on MOOCs are related to the check of compliance with quality standards of quizzes, quality standards of video. And those are checklists. There are different checklists available. I have a slide with 2 of them. Johannes already mentioned the public available list from EdX development checklist. And they have more than 10 different dimensions of quality where they check and have some criteria on this, ranging from the syllabus and introduction to the videos, to even at the policy level. And I think what I appreciate for EdX as well is the accessibility and the access, the technical accessibility for the platform. There's another project in Europe was I involved in, is the ECHO project. They published also a kind of checklist with different criteria. Again on accessibility, but also on the pedagogical approach, on the progression, design of animations is there, and even the quality of the team, the pedagogical team, etc. So yeah, different dimensions in this one. I was involved in another project, SCORE 2020. They published recently also a public list of criteria. They start, for example, is it a MOOC or not? So there are quality lists if it's an online course or is it a MOOC. So what kind of review is there? But also on the design, the content, legal issues that was mentioned in the previous session on national policies also. So what is the legal aspects and what is the quality on this, quality criteria, accessibility, etc. And this gives some kind of checklist where you can look for different criteria related to the target group, the learning objectives, on the design of MOOCs, etc. So a lot of checklists are available. The complexity is that it cannot be standardized because MOOCs are not uniform. You have different actors involved. It's the institution, the platform, proctoring services. They are designed for different target groups. And even with one target group, the motivation and the aim of the participants of the MOOCs are not uniform. So it's not like a traditional course. And another problem is that there is the unbundling of services. Who is responsible for the quality? In the end, it's the institution who gives the credit. But with the unbundling of services, you have the quality, you have to check the quality of the services that you are unbundling. So that can be the proctoring services, that can be the video recording lab, that can be the technical platform, etc. So if you look at the quality models of online education and even on MOOC quality models, by giving credits, it should be not only related to quality principles but it should be related to the improvement of quality of MOOCs. So it's not only a system where we have to check the different quality compliance on different criteria, but we need to have an aim of quality enhancement. So the continuous improvement of the MOOCs itself and the institution that's offering the MOOCs. So there's a difference between check for compliance and the quality enhancement way of looking at quality assurance. There's a publication from ICDE, coordinated by EBA. I have to look in the next one. My pronunciation is not that best. Annechien Helsdingen. No. We stated there are, if you look at quality systems, there are the low maturity systems where the quality is determined by external set of norms, where in more high maturity kind of quality system, they have embedded the processes related to the quality enhancement towards certain own objectives. So there's, again, in the eye of the beholder, but there's the own objectives, what you want to do with digital education and MOOCs, that's most important. Own objectives related to the institution, your own institution objectives, but also the objectives for the learners. So in this context, she had a global survey on different quality models for online education and e-learning. It's available on the ICDE website, is that the International Council for Distance Education. And they find that the most best quality models have an holistic view of quality, recognizing many aspects of the enterprise of the institution, and that different models vary in detail and by indicators. One example is the label we developed at EADTU, the e-excellence label for e-learning. And based on the excellence label, we made the quality label for MOOCs, the open pet quality label. So if you look at the quality assurance spectrum, and both need to be there, so I don't say one is in favor of the other. We need to have a check for compliance with certain quality standards for multiple choice questions, the content, the video, and all the criteria I mentioned before, but also the support of institutions in the quality enhancement. So where the institutions set a certain relevant goals, demonstrate the quality and the performance, and have a continuous roadmap improvement for the continuous quality improvement on this. And this is also how accreditation organizations are reviewing bachelor and master programs. It's not only by having checklists, it's by seeing that the quality processes at a higher education institution is taken seriously, that the quality assurance is at different levels at the institution in operation, not only at the course level, but also at the curriculum level, at the student level, at the teacher staff level, and even at the policy level. So my statement is that we need not only have checklists, but we need also have some kind of quality enhancement processes related on MOOCs at an institutional level. As I said, in OpenEPAD we have a certain way to look at this. We position MOOCs as part of opening up education, so as the traditional one where we all started the MOOCs as a social dimension, and to open up quality education for as much as possible, people as possible. So therefore, quality education for all is seen as one of the most important drivers behind the partners of OpenEPAD. And therefore we made a quality label related to that. Of course it had benchmark and quality criteria, but the label is mainly to check if the institution has a quality process available at different levels related to the opening up of education, the quality education. So that's objective. You have to also have the objective still in place. A reflection of this kind of quality models for MOOCs is in this paper on Springer. Preprint is available at our website. The official is had to be paid for, so not open quite so. So this was my presentation on quality frameworks, and let me stress again the importance of quality frameworks, both on the check of compliance with standards and the quality enhancement need to be in place. And it's especially important for European context when MOOCs and even part of MOOCs, and sequence of MOOCs like in MicroMasters or in even in short programs are going to be recognized, and therefore quality assurance accreditations will need to have a check on this as well.
Thank you, Darco. And I think maybe if you do agree, the best way would be to move just to the floor and look for questions, because it's such a dense and very neatly organized. So please, yes.
No mic. Okay. No, it's coming. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you to all of you for wonderful presentations. If I were sort of a rector of a university or an employer, and I would wonder about, was this a quality degree this lady has? I would look for studies, and this is a question for all of you. Are you aware of studies that compare parallel degrees? You talked about Georgia Tech offering one sort of MOOC and one on campus. That they have the same learning outcomes. All the rest is, of course, important procedure, checklists and so forth. But do you produce the same quality of exams and same quality of students? Given, of course, that the student mix is allowed for and so forth. If these studies are there, then our hand would be much stronger to convince everybody that our idea of distance learning and of MOOCs is not reducing quality. That's the outcome. Are you aware of any of these, or does anybody plan these studies? Should be done.
So I'm just going to jump in, but others can chime in. So I think there are multiple ways where there's proven to be the same outcomes or similar outcomes. I'm going to mention one example, and I see him back here, Anand, our CEO. He was the first, for example, he offered the first course ever on edX, and he's now last semester run the MOOC course on campus for MIT students for credit. So the MIT students were enrolled in the public MOOC course for credit in a separate cohort, but for credit with the same outcomes. Okay, and so that's one example of where there certainly is the same outcome, the same content available to a global audience as well as to an institutional audience. So that's one example. But there are many other examples of where we've seen, and we publish all of our data. As you know, at edX, our members get all of the data, and MIT and Harvard have published a lot of paper where we're seeing that those learners who complete the proctored courses have seen the same learning outcomes as those who are enrolled on campus. Now, there's a difference, we have to be very frank here, between those who simply enroll in a MOOC, participate in 1 week, and then there's a drop-off and so on. But we've seen up to 80% for those learners who pay for proctored services. There's an 80% completion rate in those courses. So the short answer is yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'd like also to react to that. I think that in the exchange programs that we have running with a few universities, what we say is that the MOOCs that we offer for credits should be incorporated in our regular processes. So the same processes and the same checks that we have for on-campus courses. For some partners, that means that their MOOC that they're offering for credits is exactly or almost the same as the on-campus course, and the exam is an on-campus exam and a MOOC exam. For some partners, that means that they only offer a MOOC. They don't have an on-campus equivalent, but the MOOC just follows the same academic rigor and academic checks that they have. So the academic department decides on whether it's quality for a specific program. So that's, if we want to guarantee the quality, we just keep it close to the regular academic processes that we have on campus.
Yeah, may I just say, yes, there is an important prerequisite to your question, of course. In order for your question to be answered, you need to have the course to correspond as closely as possible to the curriculum. In our experience at the University of Naples, we basically only have that kind of courses. So out of this 80 MOOCs we are just producing, we can say yes. I mean, the outcome is usually better once you come to the exams, because you can use the MOOC in a flipped classroom capacity also. So, but of course, this becomes the important condition, like he was mentioning about the course that is now offered at MIT. If you have that curricular course, then you can have the answer to your question. And it is a very important question, of course.
This has been published in the literature. It's not only available for insights.
Well, as far as literature, yes. I mean, that's of course something. Yeah, absolutely. Could you please just say your name before, and whoever is asking for questions? Yes, please.
Sure. Hi, my name is Catherine Weber, and I'm from FutureLearn. So I have a question about balancing the quality assurance process between the partners and the platform, and sort of how much of that work is done on a platform basis and how much is with the partner. And for context, I'll just explain the way that we work at FutureLearn sounds very similar in some ways to the way that edX works. We have a document which we call our course criteria. The majority of it is pedagogical, but parts of it are also technical, and we haven't really thought about it, I think, in terms of this word quality enhancement, but we consider 3 levels: one which is really not acceptable in terms of a course that we would offer, one which is acceptable, and one which is a really excellent course would offer these items, and we try to encourage partners to work towards that end of the spectrum, of course. But so we're always thinking about how to balance this work with our partners and with the work that we do in the content team at FutureLearn. And I'm just wondering how that works in your context. Thank you.
Sorry, me again. Let me preface it by saying that we have to be open-minded and honest and say not all MOOCs are of fantastic academic rigor. And neither should they be, because I think there is an educational learning experience in many courses that isn't necessarily targeted at achieving academic credit, but that's targeted at more general interest or at a career outcome. So it may not necessarily be aligned to academic rigor. But we do think that it's critical for a provider to engage with the institutions in a very active basis to provide facilitation and guidance. But ultimately, the quality or the academic rigor is up to the academic institution, just as it should be, because the academic institution controls their own standards. And as I said earlier, at one institution, what might be deemed a really, really hard course at somewhere else is an easier course. Yesterday I had a discussion, one of the courses that RWTH Aachen offers, for example, on Chiron for credit. Some of the other institutions were complaining, saying that's too advanced, that's a master's level course, but you said it's an introductory course. But that's just their standard. So I think the platforms play an important role in facilitating that. I'm also curious to hear what FUN is doing, for example, in France. I think we set the parameters, we set guidelines, but the academic institutions really need to come through.
Let me make a comment on this one as well, because if you are a platform or a MOOC partnership, then you need to focus on the quality of your brand as well. So there's a tension between accepting all kinds of MOOCs, all kinds of institutions, and protecting the quality of your brand. And therefore, there's a tension between those two. Therefore, you need to have checklist or compliance to certain standards you want to achieve as a platform or as a partnership, as we are in OpenEBET. And then there's a balance on how to check if an institution is compliant to your standards and objectives, but also to assist and to guidance that is provided. And therefore, we, as OpenEBET, we focused on, like in academic culture, on the review part. You need to review not only the MOOC itself, but also the institutional quality assurance process. So we had a lot of discussion. Do we want to check every MOOC of one institution? Or only want to check the quality assurance and the quality enhancement processes of the institution itself? So not of one professor, but the institution has a policy on MOOC. It has quality enhancement processes and quality processes in place. And you have to check for that. And then not checking if it's okay or not okay, but also to check for a roadmap for improvement for the next years. And therefore we decided not to check every MOOC, but just at entrance check 2 MOOCs and the quality enhancement and quality process of institution. So there's a different way to operate that. So main message, there's a common interest because there is the brand you have to have as a MOOC provider. And the institution itself need to be guided as well, so therefore the quality enhancement is very important.
Hello, Pierre Delambeau from EPFL. I like what you said. As a university, we don't like platform to check the quality of our MOOC. We do our own control ourselves. We don't like this kind of external thing. I wanted to come back to your question about whether MOOCs are good for learning, and you gave the example of an MOOC and you got result. It doesn't mean that MOOCs are good for learning. It means that an MOOC was good for learning. We have to be very careful about this kind of generalization. There is no MOOC effect. The result of research is clear. Good MOOCs are better than bad MOOCs. Okay, that's no, but I mean there is nothing. Yeah, but there is nothing that makes a MOOC good just because it's a MOOC. And what I don't like in all this checklist is that basically they kind of target superficial things, I find. What makes a good MOOC is what the learners do between videos, okay? The problems they have to solve. And that's kind of a black box. That's the most important part. And this weekly assignment simulation problem solving, this is almost not evaluated, while this is, I would say, 90% of the learning outcomes. So that's something we should develop. This, how do you measure the quality of the learning activities?
In this context, Pierre, I don't have the solution yet, but there's one project I'd like to mention. It's MOOC Knowledge, who develops a pre-test and a post-test at the MOOC level, not activity level, because you are referring to activities. And not referring to success rate, but also on the motivation where students are involved in MOOCs, pre-test and post-test. So the motivation, why they are involved, and their own objectives are important instead of only the institutional or teacher objectives. So that's one way to look at it. It's not the solution, the answer you get, but it's one way on the MOOC level where you can have also to have a different view on success rate is to measure the motivation of the participants beforehand and afterwards.
Hi, I'm Eran Raviv, Campus IL, Israel's national online education platform. So we have that same challenge. We tried to develop a scale that will give your MOOC a grade somewhere between 0 and 10, according to different quality assurance models. And for the academic part and for the technical part, we find it quite easy to communicate that because it's all pretty objective. I mean, the academic part, that's the university's decision, and the technical part, that's our best practices and quality assurance standards. But for the pedagogic part we see that as very challenging, as it's very subjective. My digital learning strategist thinks that a certain percentage of videos should be in a course, and a certain number of activities and diversity of assessment tools, etc. And I'm wondering, what's your take on that challenge? Thanks.
I think that there's a lot of literature available on evidence-based interventions in the pedagogical literature that show you what type of activities are best for what type of learning content. I think, though, you should always have that integrated with the content that you're trying to teach. It's not like a pedagogical trick that you put from outside. So I would say that's kind of difficult, but I don't see the subjectivity that it's any more subjective than would be a quality assurance checklist or framework for the content. It's just it's a different expertise, and I think you need a multidisciplinary team to actually be able to evaluate the quality on all those levels.
Just maybe to add both to Pierre's comment and your comment, I think, Pierre, yes, absolutely, it's granted. There are good MOOCs, there are bad MOOCs, but there are good university courses, there are bad university courses. And what we found is, that the diversity of the teachers is reflected as much on a MOOC platform as it is on campus. And so what's important within an institution is really to engage with the faculty members and take the lessons learned from initial courses. That's why we think it's so important to collect data, to share the data, so that you can use that on campus to truly assess what has worked and what are your objectives. Sometimes a MOOC has a simple objective, and that is to generate as much marketing. Ideally, in the academic context, there are certain learning outcomes that you want to drive, and therefore you design the course and work with instructional designers to engage there. And I think your comment is really valid, that there is a lot of literature, and there are a lot of lessons that we've learned about engaging courses and what's important. That's why interleaving video sequences with exercises and having team concepts and all of those things are critical. I always like to say we are still really quite early on in our journey. If you think of the big MOOC platforms, when we started Coursera and FutureLearn as well. FutureLearn is 2 or 3 years old. Coursera and edX are 5/6 years old. Academic institutions are thousands of years old, and they're still struggling with the issue of academic credibility and quality. So we've come a long way, and my hope is that institutions also don't just look inwards, but they look outwards. And that's, again, where the credit exchange is so helpful, because it really makes institutions assess and saying, okay, what do they do? What can we learn from that, and how can it be applied? So it's not necessarily an answer, it's more hopeful thinking.
Okay. Right. I'm Gabby Whithouse from Loughborough University in the UK. I think that's really exciting about the credit exchange programs, and I see that significantly changing the student experience for people already in the system. What about the millions of people, say, in developing countries who could be getting credit from MOOCs and maybe are already getting credit on MOOCs, but I heard Johannes talk about the Georgia Tech program, which is substantially cheaper at $10,000 as opposed to $50,000 if you do it online. But that is still an amount of money that is unimaginable to many people in the world. So where are we in terms of providing real higher education for people via MOOCs who previously who wouldn't normally have access to traditional higher education?
So it's not only about teaching them something, but it's about, you know, giving them an accredited certificate. And that's difficult because there's certain standards for example, for EPFL credits. One of the things that EPFL is doing is a certificate of open studies, where we have certain list of criteria that need to be met. But if those criteria mainly have to do with examination and checking the identity of the learner, so that you can establish that. So it has nothing to do with the quality of the MOOC itself, but it has all to do with the interaction between the learner and the MOOC, I think. So that we can establish that, you know, whomever we give the credit to was actually the one taking part in the course and doing the exam. And those certificates of open studies are available for through an initiative in Francophone Africa. They're available for free or for a limited amount, but only because of sponsors that we have. The thing is, if you want to really establish the identity of the learner and the learning outcomes at the individual level, that requires manpower or technology, and that costs money.
Just to add to that really quickly, I think this is initially we all started by, and we still have that goal, reimagining education and really changing the world and providing access to everyone, everywhere, anytime. That's still very much the mantra and the mission. Realistically, cost is still an impediment across the world. And that's an opportunity, I think, both for foundations, for corporations, even for governments, to do much more, to offer support. Now, on the edX side, and I think other providers do as well, we offer some sort of financial aid and assistance to people, so you can apply to that, and in some instances, you know, we grant that. But there's a limit to what we can do. So if this is truly a societal problem that we all seek to change, then quite frankly, in some way, governments need to step up even more. I think as a MOOC provider, we're not going to solve that problem.
Let me add to that the importance of a decentralized model as well, where we see in Europe already there are national platforms, not only in France, but also in Portugal is under development, in the Czech Republic, etc. And when we look in Africa or people who don't have the money to pay for informal credit, we need to pay attention to the capacity building of the local universities in this one. And of course, they don't have the means to develop MOOCs and have a MOOC platform, but they have the national infrastructure, the accreditation to do and to deliver the MOOCs. Therefore, I advocate again to promote the reuse of MOOCs in the local context, so that we have an open licensing where we need to collaborate with those national initiatives and the national policy, but we also need to provide reusable MOOCs in different contexts, in different languages.
My name is Jeffrey Cross. I'm from Tokyo Institute of Technology, and I'd like to ask Annechien, if I may. For example, in the Global Alliance, and you have various institutions from different continents actually, and they're offering credit for their courses. How do you define the credit unit, or does each institution offer credit for a specific amount and that can be converted to the host university's students who are taking the class? So could you address, for example, the credit unit that each university is offering?
Yeah, that's a bit of a practical difficulty between those universities. The ECTS, one ECTS is anywhere between 25 and 30 worked hours. So we're now in the process of setting up these conversion tables between the universities. And you run into all these practical issues that have to do with how many hours do you consider that a student has in a year, and I think student workloads are different between different countries on a case-by-case basis, and we try to work out and then have the conversion. But the thing is, so if Australian National University wants to accept an EPFL MOOC for credits, then we will provide the MOOC, we will provide the exam, we will do the assessment, they will take the exam there, we will do the assessment, and then we send the transcript to Australian National University, and what they do and how they accept it to fit into their own curriculum is their choice. So each partner has a specific role in that, and we are not the ones dictating Australian National University, this is 6 credits, and therefore it's this amount of hours, and you should accept it as such. No, it's their choice how that fits into their program.
Annechien, sorry, just on this point, what is the main difference with respect to the Erasmus program, with the mechanism you are describing? Because this is exactly the way Erasmus works. I mean, so is it just that it? Basically, the only difference is that rather than, no, because this is very important. It's like, you know, if it is the Erasmus, then basically it can be very much and very easily expanded. Because the only difference is that in the Erasmus program, the student needs to be on campus. In this case, they only need to take the course online. So is there a difference? What is the difference? Because the process you were describing is, I mean, from what my experience
okay.
It's
It's
90% what we deal with Erasmus.
yes,
So
but it's exponentially. So that last 10%, you know, is very difficult. It is similar to the Erasmus program, but the thing is, you stay as a student. You only take one course. You stay at your own university. You do the exam at your own university. So legally, there's some differences. If you just go from this university to another university, you're just at that other university. You're on their campus, you follow their rules, you're engaged in that environment. Now, here is a student in his or her home environment doing a course virtually at another university. There's a whole lot of legal and practical issues related to that. Timing, national holidays, where to complain if you are in an exam room and there's a lot of noise outside. So those are all the practical problems. And Pierre, please add, because you're... Yeah, thank you.
The basic idea is there.
Yes.
We have something unique in Europe. We have Bologna. We've made it. We have all these things. This is fantastic. We have credits. We have Erasmus. We have everything. MOOCs could just plug in. That's very simple. Everybody says yes. And then it's a nightmare. What if the student has got the flu the day of the exam? And what about the blind students? And what about, it's a nightmare. And what if the course actually has some chapters, or some chapters of the course given on campus are not in the MOOC, and what on campus they can access the labs, and students in Delft cannot access Lausanne lab. So it's this 10%, maybe it's 5%. It's a nightmare. This is why I found somebody to do it, because I was exhausted to do it.
yeah, but still, I mean, you know, it would be interesting to discuss what actually the nightmare is, because, you know, I've been, as any university professor in Europe, dealing with the Erasmus. So you have a process of recognition, and it goes through some kind of faculty or department deliberation. But basically, there's already a standard bureaucratic routine through which what is, you know, recognized as an exam in some kind of Spanish university then becomes also for credit in my university once there is an agreement. I'm only trying to see, yes, the exam is taken there, while in this case it's taken on the book, whatever, but still, well, I don't want to intrude it too much, but still it's a curiosity, because it looks like you're getting so close to the solution, and then you tell me it's a nightmare, so it would be interesting.
We are piloting, and we've since February, we have the first courses that we offer to each other, but we meet every 2 weeks, virtually. And every 2 weeks, we take a couple of hours to discuss all the problems, and we're still not there, but we are getting there.
So the people who applied Erasmus rules to my university told us that what we do is totally illegal, okay? And so we try to be compliant, and sometimes say, why don't you change a little bit the rules, no? A virtual Erasmus cannot be a pure copy of Erasmus. Can you change a little bit the rules? And the answer is 9.
Okay. So, who else? Yes.
I'm Rainer Sauerborn from Heidelberg University, and recently I'm visiting professor at the School of Public Health in Harvard, trying to do a MOOC. That's one of my jobs there. A MOOC, research on research methods to study the impact of climate change on health. So it is in many aspects a very specific MOOC. But that's an aside. I wanted to come back to the issue of cost. Since we were talking about, let's compare the traditional course with the MOOCs in terms of student outcome, and everybody said it's been published, it's great. Are you aware of any study that compares the costs? Somebody mentioned the costs, and it's somehow in a kind of embarrassed way mentioned along the conference. Has anybody compared the cost that it takes to develop a MOOC with the cost that it takes to develop a short course? And then the cost that it takes to teach them. And here, of course, the MOOCs become very inexpensive. And there must be a break off, if you like, or a meeting point of these two curves, beyond which, and I have now 6 years of experience with the short course and 2 years with the MOOC, same content, and I'm trying to do such an analysis. But that should be done more often. The master compared with the master here. Are you aware of any of these studies?
This is a question for the final session, you know, the one about 10 questions you do not dare to ask. However, if you want to respond, please.
I recently looked into it. There's a lot of information available on how much time it costs to develop online education compared to how much time it costs to develop on-campus education. So you can have all sorts of ratios. My proposal internally was that a MOOC would, at a very, when it comes to the academic department, a very modest estimate. You still need twice or 2.5 times as much time to develop a MOOC as you would for developing on-campus course materials. And then delivering is a different story, but when it comes to delivering for your formal education programs, then delivery is again quite labor intensive, because you need people to just be able to respond to forum discussions and all that. But of course that is less work. But there's a lot available. Yeah.
And I was just going to echo that, and then just give a very quick favorite answer of mine, which no one ever likes, and that is, it depends. So, because yes, you can, you know, some institutions for some courses spend a lot of money on producing a particular MOOC, and you can do it in a quite cost-effective manner. But ultimately, the upfront cost for MOOC is potentially higher, but the efficiencies you gain over the medium and long term make it worthwhile from our perspective. And the short term cost a lot of money, and you know, there are many folks in this room who are producing MOOCs, are responsible for producing MOOCs, and maybe they can seek you out afterwards, and you're probably 10 people, 10 different stories. It depends. It depends, unfortunately, yes.
One example of it depends is that there is an European funded MOOC project called MOOCs for All, also called Locomotion, and they try to focus on how to make the development cost as low as possible. Of course, you can look at the quality, so then do you need a kind of video room and video recordings, the most sophisticated one, or can you do it with an iPhone, and what's the loss of quality in return to learning, etc. So, but there's an experiment on lowering that cost as well. And in the operational costs, it depends on the design as well. How is your design? Because if you are really designing a MOOC, you are designing for massive audience, so it needs to be scalable.
But there is a quite limited information available of how much time it costs to develop an on-campus course. So, and on the MOOC development and online education development, there's a lot of data available, but how much time you as a university professor spend on developing a new course, it's not really.
Yeah. And last but not least, certainly from our perspective, our role as edX is not to develop the courses, the institutions develop our courses to make it as efficient as possible for you to develop the courses. So that's our goal, continuously reduce the cost to actually produce courses, make the platform more simple to use, make content more transferable, imports, exports, all of those things. So I think we've already seen a curve where the initial cost for the first courses was up here, and now we're at a much, much lower price point.
Let me, in this context, refer to also the quality of, for example, multiple choice questions. There's some research on the quality of multiple choice questions of MOOCs, and the result is not that good. But what does it say if you cannot test it to on-campus closed multiple choice questions? So there's a reference as well. You need a reference to the on-campus situation, and then multiple choice questions are open, so you can have an analysis how well they fit to the standard of multiple choice questions, and questionable, but perhaps on campus may be worse. So, yeah.
More questions? So it looks like we have time just for some final remarks, and we may go into the opposite order, just very short, like 2.5 minutes each.
Only a few seconds for me then. So I'm very enthusiastic that MOOCs are not in hype anymore, or still hype. They are here to stay. They are not here to stay in non-formal learning. They are becoming part of our formal education. And therefore recognition, credit recognition and quality assurance need to be in place. And that's under development.
So I guess my parting words are that I would encourage all of you to continue to experiment, to pilot, to assess and engage with your peers across institutional boundaries. Quite often what we've found is that institutions, unfortunately, quite inward looking, and there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from each other. And certainly our perspective, the edX perspective, is we're here to go on the journey together with you, and we've achieved a lot already, and we will achieve much, much more.
Yeah, my final thoughts are that I'm feeling like I'm preaching for the choir here all the time, right? These people are already involved in MOOCs, and they're all willing to collaborate. There was the question whether MOOCs were disrupting education or disrupting the labor market, but from my perspective, it's disrupting administration at universities. And that's the major difficulty that we have. So we also need to reach out and tell other people, and not only higher management, because they're all for it, but it's like the administrative layer somewhere there that needs to work with us to change some of the internal rules, because it's not, you know, accepting MOOCs for credits, it's not all about the quality of the MOOCs, it's also changing your own internal legislation and rules to allow MOOCs to become part of formal education. So let's start preaching to other choirs.
Thank you to all of you. Thank you for your attention and very insightful discussion. Thank you.